Kai and Onision Greg have children in that environment.
Wow.
And there is a very strong case to be made for enticement, transmission of child porn, and some other potential federal crimes here. So we're staying on this story, and it's starting to yield some results.
Joining us this morning is Mike Morse, Detroit's top attorney. Mike Morse is in here to tell us about the backpack giveaway.
Adapt and change things up a little bit every year. Well, welcome, Chris Hansen, to the Open Mic Podcast.
Thank you, Mike Morse. Great to be here.
You have a great voice. Has anybody ever told you that before?
I've heard that. Even when I try to be undercover, I have to keep my mouth shut because I'll be recognized.
It's really good. Were you ever in radio before TV?
I started in radio, actually, in Lansing, Michigan, when I was at Michigan State University.
Wow.
Worked up there.
So, born and raised here in the Michigan?
Born in Chicago, and my dad was transferred here in 1968, so I grew up in suburban Detroit.
Okay. And where'd you go to high school?
I went to Brother Rice High School, Michigan State, and then started in television as a reporter for TV10 Action News when I was still in school in Lansing.
Nice. And then eventually you worked with this guy here who I failed to introduce, Kevin Dietz.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome.
Chris, good to see you again.
I was the Dietz family's 8th kid growing up.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you guys know each other in high school?
He was in my older brother's class, and so they were best of friends and still are. And so I saw a lot of them as a younger brother kind of tagging along.
I fear we set a bad example for him.
That's interesting. Okay. And then how'd you guys, who got a job at Channel 4 first?
Chris did. I am quite a bit younger than Chris. So I was never actually at Brother Rice when he was at Brother Rice. And then when I was in college, I started working in radio. He was working at Channel 10 in Lansing. And then I went to work up north, and then my second job was in Lansing at Channel 6. So then when Chris went to Dateline, he gave me his job, basically. It's a funny story because, I'd been interviewing, trying to get to...
It gets better every time we tell it.
Yeah, right. But Chris was heading off to Dateline. I was working for the Grand Rapids TV market, and I was trying to get to Detroit to any of the stations, and Chris was leaving, and I'm like, Chris, you got to get me in before you go. And so he told the news director, he said, look, they had pagers at the time, not cell phones. He said, look, I got all my contacts on this pager, and I'm giving this pager to Kevin Dietz. So my contacts are calling this pager. If you want my contacts to answer the phone and end up on your news station, you better hire them at Channel 4 and not let them go to Channel 7 or Channel 2.
That's nice.
It was an immediate success, Kevin was.
Well, you left here in 93, is that true?
93, I went to NBC, and actually originally for another show that was on for a short period of time, and that all rolled into Dateline a year later.
Interesting, because I remember you on Channel 4. You were great there, and I remember thinking that was a loss for Detroit, you moving on to New York, but then I thought they found a star.
Well, it was interesting because I always thought that, I'd end up staying in Detroit my whole life, growing up with Bonds as a, sort of a second father, as did Kevin. And 3 years at Channel 7 and 5 years at Channel 4. And this opportunity came. I really thought I'd go away for 2 years and come back. And just one thing led to another. And now turned into Dateline, and Dateline turned into everything else that I'm doing today. And so it's 26 years later. It's amazing.
It is amazing. So take me on the path of how To Catch a Predator came around. Whose idea was it? Was that an immediate thing when you got to Dateline? I don't remember the history.
It was many years later. So I started at NBC in 93, and about 2004, I was talking to Kevin, actually, and we speak at least once a month about stories and what are you working on and what's happening and what are the trends. And he said, you may want to call these guys Perverted Justice. They're an online watchdog group, and they used to set up stings. They'd, have a conversation with somebody. They'd have a decoy posing as a 12, 13, 14-year-old. They would catch a guy trying to solicit who he thought was a child. They'd post it on their website, and we got talking, and I talked to them, and I pitched it for a Dateline story, thinking that if we could use our hidden cameras and our ability to, wire a house and sit on it, that it could be pretty compelling. But honestly, Mike, I didn't know it was going to happen.
So this was your idea?
So we did.
Kevin's idea.
We did it. We did it here. I did the story here locally. It wasn't called To Catch a Predator. We called it something Online Predators or something. And we set up a home in Birmingham with cameras. And we had this unit, Perverted Justice, who did this kind of thing anyway. That's just what they did. They would catch these people and they'd put it online. So we teamed up with them to do a news story on it. And they started looking for people locally here in the Detroit area. And they found them. They'd come to the door. They'd show up with their Twinkies or whatever we asked them to bring them. And I'd run down the street chasing them. They'd drive off in their cars. They'd fly away. We didn't have the police involved arresting them or anything. We were just kind of figuring it out. And I said, Chris, this is unbelievable. How many people respond to this thing? What happens when they show up? It's just unbelievable television. And I said, you really should look into it and take a look at it. It was very successful here. We ended up doing it 4 times, which is a ton for local TV. You just don't.
It's a big project.
Yeah, huge project. Exactly.
But I thought the first time we did it in Long Island that, what if nobody shows up? Honestly, we had Perverted Justice there posing as kids. We had hidden cameras. We had regular cameras. We had security. But I'm driving to the house, and I'm thinking, what if I just blown, $50,000 of NBC's money? And with that, I get a phone call from my producer saying, there's 2 guys on the way, due in 45 minutes. Where are you? We got there, and 17 men, including a New York City firefighter, came through the door in a period of 2.5 days.
Was that the biggest one you did?
No, we did one, 2 investigations after that in Riverside County, California. 51 men showed up in 3 days.
So as I was preparing for this interview, I watched it, and I didn't realize that there were so many people per house. Mm-hmm. So one was 11, I saw, this one 13, this one 51. I mean, those are unbelievable numbers. So how did you space them apart?
Well, sometimes we didn't. I remember one time in Florida, we had 2 show up at the same time, and the producer and the security guy looks at me and said, "How do you feel about doing 2 at a time? Because they're outside." I said, "What's their background? Do they look violent? Do we think they're carrying weapons or anything?" And the usual questions. No, they look pretty good. All right, so they walk in, and I never forget. One guy was slaves for mistresses, and the other guy was tennis boy 213. And I introduced them to each other. One guy knew what the deal was. He recognized me, and the other guy did not. And he looks over and says, "Do you know that when he's through with us, we are so..." It was amazing. It was in Flagler Beach, Florida.
You also caught one guy like twice, right? Like you came to 2 different sting houses.
Well, we had one guy who showed up in Riverside, and I could see that he had some sort of surgery on the side of his head. There was a cutout scar, and he wasn't the sharpest fellow, or appeared to be. And so he didn't have a major role in that particular investigation because we had so many other guys anyway. And then less than a month later, we're in Long Beach, a couple hours away, and this guy is online again. And he says in the transcript, he says, "I can't come on Friday. I've got a court date." Well, the court date was from the Riverside investigation. No. So he shows up on a Saturday night. Then we get into his background. And this was fairly early on in the series. So we were just realizing how to find out about these guys more before they arrived, which is the key to this. And we realized that he had done a year in jail for a violent attack. I said, well, all bets are off. I don't care whether he's got a scar on his head or not. He's making the movie. And we, caught him in that sting.
So, I have so many questions running through my head. How many total people did you have a sit down with?
Probably close to 330.
And out of those 330, were almost all arrested? In
the first 2 investigations, Mike, we didn't have a parallel investigation with the police. We just did it on our own. But there were cases made. For instance, in the first investigation, the firefighter was prosecuted. In the second investigation, there was a rabbi, there was a teacher, there was a military guy, there was all people from all walks of life, and so some prosecutions were made in that case. And it was then that I figured out this isn't just a 1-shot deal or a 2-shot deal. This is something we're going to have to continue. And 2 things came to mind. One, it was socially irresponsible to let these guys just go because it was harder for the police to build a case. And 2, it was unfulfilling for the viewer to see these guys walk away in the wind just from a practical television production standpoint. So it was right about then that we were contacted by Riverside County Sheriff's Department and said, "Do you want to do this?" And so we fashioned a way, and we took a lot of criticism from, Scarlet J journalists, you're working too close to police, you can't do this, you can't do that. Well, you know what? Sometimes you have to change the rules. You have to expand your horizons. You have to do what's right for society, for the story, and for public safety. And I'll take that criticism anytime.
Yeah, as I was reading the articles, I saw some of that criticism, and I didn't get it. I mean, you were here, the first one. I mean, some people thought that you were, entrapping these people. I don't see that at all.
It's not entrapment. First of all, you have to be law enforcement to commit entrapment. It's not a civil infraction,
right,
as you know as a lawyer.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's number one. Number two, we have a very strict protocol, and even the last one that we did, the most recent one in Connecticut, the guys have to raise the specter of sex first. They have to make the solicitation. They have to make the first approach. There are a number of protocols in place that are consistent with those of law enforcement and a fair and honest prosecution. So it's really the solicitation online that makes the case,
right,
that breaks law. Him showing up is the TV part of it, really, at the end of the day.
Well, it's also the overt act. I mean, they can get in trouble for soliciting online, but I doubt there's many cases that are made just from online chatting. I mean, I think your idea to bring him forward is just brilliant. I don't know how many other law enforcements are doing that. And the fact that this was your idea after doing 2 episodes, you're like, we need law enforcement, and then you approached law enforcement and said, you guys want to partner with us?
Well, law enforcement in that case actually approached us. And since then, it's been somewhat in between. I've approached law enforcement in the most recent investigation. It was approaching the Fairfield Police Department in Connecticut. We're in discussions with 2 or 3 others to go back out there and do another one. And as you know that the technology out there is so vastly different, and there are so many more social platforms upon which an underage boy or girl can be approached and solicited.
Yeah, they're reaching them through their video games now. Your kid's online playing video games, and all of a sudden a stranger is contacting them, and the next thing they're making an arrangement to try and meet your kid. And here you're worried about Facebook, and you're so far away. There's so many ways.
I'll give you an example. I'm sitting with one of my producers when we're doing the Crime Watch Daily Show, and he's with his son, who's then 14, and he's on some app. And he said, what are you doing? Out to a restaurant dinner. He said, well, it's this neat thing. I can talk to whomever I want to, or randomly at any given time. And he said, well, how's it work? He looks up the kids, like I said, 15, and ends up talking to a woman who identifies herself as being 42 and says, I just got out of the shower. I'm kind of wet. Do you want to talk? And he's like, give me that, But it's
crazy.
Yeah.
I have an 11-year-old daughter who's on the TikToks and on all the things, and it's scary. So I want to just, out of the 330 people that you've had to sit down with and confront in this situation, how many do you keep track of? How many were charged and how many actually pled guilty or went to trial?
I only know of one case where there was a prosecution that ended in a dismissal.
Really?
And even then, it had worked its way through the court system for so long. It was for a couple different evidentiary reasons. It was a lesser important case, and they said, well, he served some time, let him go. But in every case that I'm aware of, that I've followed, since law enforcement did a parallel investigation, there's either been a guilty plea, a conviction, or a no contest plea.
Wow.
Virtually every single
so over
case.
300.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
What do you think it is that makes To Catch a Predator so interesting to everybody? I mean, not a month goes by that I don't see a reference to it pop up somewhere. Either it's a punchline on late night comedy, or it's in a TV series somewhere, or South Park does an episode on it. What is it about it that just captivates everybody?
Well, I think there are a number of things. One, we took people into a world they wouldn't have seen before. Everything is about crime. And for guys like you and me who have made a living in the crime space, it's job security, whether it's Killer Instinct on ID or any of the half dozen things I'm working on now. And so there is this innate interest when you can take people inside of a crime, show them things they wouldn't normally see, have them listen to things they wouldn't normally hear, all from the comfort of their cell phone, their television, or their computer. It draws people in. I mean, there's just no way around it. So I think there's that. I think there's, when we started doing it, it was, very important that we not just beat these guys over the head and chase them down the street necessarily, but to lure them in, if you will, to a conversation where I can get inside these guys' heads and hear what they were thinking, good, bad, or indifferent. And it just became this pop culture thing. I always tell the story, my kids, thought it was no big deal that their dad was on television. They went to high school with, bond traders and bon vivants and all kinds of famous, it's just another job. But when South Park did the parody, as Kevin mentioned, suddenly I was the coolest dad at Fairfield Prep High School,
That's fabulous. I watched that yesterday. Kevin sent that to me. It was great.
𝗕𝗘𝗦𝗧𝗏.
So, I'm wondering, as I'm watching these episodes, unfortunately, it didn't eradicate online predators.
No.
But do people think twice? Did it help curtail some of the scumbags out there?
I think what it does is it tells parents, you better pay attention. These guys are out here. They're coming in big numbers. They probably can't stop themselves. Even if they knew it was a sting operation, they're going to come. So parents better pay attention. This is not something that you can just watch on TV and not think that it can't happen to you.
That's a good point. Because I remember when I first saw the show, when was the first what year was the first episode?
2004.
And it went until the first...
Originals went until on NBC till right around 2009, and then we recut them and redid them, and they aired forever on MSNBC, and then we went back out 3 years ago and did another one.
Right. So I remember the first time watching it that it was like kind of the beginning of the internet-ish. I mean, not really, but kind of. And it was like, it was like a wake-up call. It was a massive wake-up call, I think, for the whole world to see these shows. And so good for you for doing this, and good for you for coming up with this concept.
Well, people were a little bit afraid of the concept. I got to tell you, we did it, and it was ready to go in May at NBC. And it didn't air until that fall. And ultimately, there was a meeting, of everybody working on it. And one of the senior guys says, I'm just not sure how to promote this. I said, are you kidding me? I said, here's how you promote it. There's a guy standing outside your back door, and he wants to have sex with your 11-year-old daughter. Tonight, we're going to show you how to stop that. That's how you promote it. And it went on the air.
And it went on the air. Did you have was there any immediate backlash?
There was no backlash, but I can tell you because of the graphic nature of some of the content, and I tried to weigh this very carefully because it's to me it's not just being a journalist, it's also being a father, being held accountable at the kids' schools, to fellow parents, etc. So you try to take people into the graphic nature of it without exploiting it. But when it was airing at 8 o'clock, you have an advertising problem. When you're airing at 9 o'clock, you don't have an advertising problem.
And part of the story, Mike, is you want to show the parents how it goes from an initial contact online to somebody actually coming to your house. So what they do is they show the entire conversation, how it starts here, but it builds up into something else. And as you're trying to tell that story, you have to deal with adult conversations.
Yeah, and it's amazing to me. People say, why does this continue? Well, it's the addictive nature, the anonymity, and the access. I mean, people say things online that they wouldn't say face-to-face, and then it becomes acceptable. And so what a 30-year-old guy who maybe is in this middle category of not offending unless he had access to the internet, suddenly this is okay because it starts incrementally. And the seduction, the grooming from the other end is accepted incrementally. And suddenly the guy who was a stranger on Tuesday is your best buddy who's going to send you a cell phone on Friday.
As I was watching your interviews, I mean, I was wondering, I was trying to imagine what's going through your head. I mean, do you ever feel sorry for these
Sometimes
guys?
You see a veteran come in who fought in Iraq, who's got PTSD, who's living a rough life, looking for love, thought in a moment that maybe he saw something in somebody who was too young, But then you see the other side of it, and you realize that if it wasn't a decoy, if it was a real 14, 15-year-old, just the conversation and the first exposure to sexual activity or to the male anatomy at that age is a life-altering and harmful experience that child will carry for the rest of their life. And you know the laws, and that's why we have such strict laws on child pornography.
And
every time, every viewing is a re-victimization of that child.
And seriously, now if you care about these people who have this illness who are doing this, and if you suspect someone you love or know is involved with this, you want to get involved right away to help them stop that. I mean, every day down at federal court, I see 2, 3, 4, 5 of these cases come in, and they are charging them with anything from 5 years to 105 years based on how far they're able to get in their sickness. So, yeah, you can feel bad for them because you can say, oh, they're sick or they're not right. But at the same time, you want to get help for them because you don't want more victims, and you don't necessarily want them to spend the rest of their life in jail if it can be prevented.
And here's the key. If you talk to people who deal with these guys in prison, guys who are doing lengthy sentences, who have nothing to lose, so they tell the truth, you'll realize they're not all the same guy. And what we want in society today is a one-size-fits-all cure, a drug, a punishment, or therapy of some sort. And they're not the same guy. So one guy may have to be locked up the rest of their life. One guy could have therapy and punishment and be done. One guy could have probation and monitoring computer access and never reoffend. But we don't want to take the time. And it's not a glamorous part of the medical world.
Right. It's interesting, as I was watching, and I think you alluded to it on one of the episodes I watched, this was not their first time doing this. Yeah. And they try to tell you it's their first time. I love how you try to draw them out before you tell them why you're there or who you're there for. Do they think you're the dad or whatever? I mean, why are these people actually talking? Why aren't they bolting out of that room?
Well, some do, to be fair. Some do bolt. Very few, amazingly still to me.
And I was trying to figure out the psychology of that. I'm curious what your thoughts are, because I want to know your thoughts, but my thought was, they're. I mean, inside these people are like acting like they're like children. They're like these
they
wounded.
got caught. Yeah, they got caught.
And they got caught. And you're standing. You tell them to have a seat. They sit. So you're now kind of the parent role, standing above them. They know they got caught. They do look like children to me. Even though they're 30, 40 years old, they look like children. And I'm wondering if they're like paralyzed, they can't go. I mean, one guy offered you a piece of pizza. Oh, yeah. Do you remember that episode?
Oh, yes.
You
that
turned
was
it down.
The latest one, yeah.
You turned that one down.
We had the pizza waiting for him. He picked up the pizza.
Right.
We told him where to go. But I think we have the drop on him, psychologically. And I think it is, as you say, a little bit of the authority figure controlling the situation. And I do try to control it for a lot of reasons, for safety of me, of the crew, everybody there. But I also think that they don't always know. Sometimes they'll recognize, it's Chris Hansen, it's the Hansen versus Predators or To Catch a Predator, but they really don't know. And they're so busy trying to figure out, how am I going to get out of this? And then it switches over to, maybe I should just get it off my chest. I've been carrying this horrible secret for so long, and I'm going to just... And when I look at them, I say, take me into your mind and explain to me why you do this. And more often than not, they'll say, well, I've been online for a long time, and I've gotten older, but the people with whom I speak keep getting younger. And it has become a problem, or whatever their issue is.
This one, the pizza episode that we're referring to, he basically, you said to him, well, what do you expect to do? If the mother consents to this, are you planning on having sex with her or marrying her? And he basically said, maybe. Yeah. Like, that's a real possibility for this guy.
This guy drove from Boston. Jeff Sokol was his name. Worked in the insurance business. Drove from Boston to Fairfield, Connecticut.
I'm not surprised he worked in the insurance business. I'm sorry to say.
I set you right up there, didn't I?
You did. You set me up. Keep going.
So he shows up and calls along the way and says, where should I stop? Well, my son, who was on the crew, my oldest son, I said, you went to high school around here. What's the pizza? He said, send him to XYZ Pizza. So he did. So, we could follow him all the way in. It just gives us a little help track him. So he shows up with the pizza. And in his car, he's got this wedding contract of sorts, basically saying if she signs here and puts her signature and her initials, that it's going to be okay.
To have sex.
Legal.
He can't get arrested because he's...
in his own mind. It's bizarre. That was the same investigation, by the way, where we had a guy show up who was a guy who worked for the local cable company, so he's in people's homes every day, and he was on the waiting list to become a law enforcement officer in the state of Connecticut. A former Army soldier who had a gun, a knife, a camera, duct tape, and rope in his car.
That scared me. I read that. That
Was trouble.
Now, was that on the air? Did that get aired?
Yeah, no, that aired.
So I have to go back and watch that one. That's the fact that you guys are able to, well, the cops search the cars after and find. I mean, that is a scary situation.
Yeah. And
I mean, had you not
this
been
guy,
there?
Yeah. Well, what's going to happen? And he wanted to take the girl for driving lessons in a parking lot. Well, what's going to happen at the end of that driving
It's
lesson?
not going to be a good lesson.
No.
Wow.
Yeah, and if he hadn't picked that decoy, he might have met a real person.
Well, wait a minute. He's not catching every decoy.
Right.
There are thousands of kids out there who are actually meeting with adults today.
All the time.
And that's really the scary thing, because this is probably just the tip of the iceberg.
I mean, you talk to 𝗕𝗓𝗏𝗂𝗍𝗏, who's a leading speaker in this field, victim's advocate, who was online several years ago at the age of 13. And this guy tricks her into giving information, shows up, meets her, kidnaps her, takes her to his basement, sexually assaults her, and live streams it, right? Until the FBI finally figures out through those streams where it is, rescues her. She thought she was dead. Now she goes and speaks, and we sit on some boards together. But it's a harrowing story. Then this guy pleads guilty, does 17 years. They let him on a parole to the same neighborhood near Pittsburgh where her family lives. So they lock him back up because of, extenuating circumstances. But, I mean, here's a girl who was really a good girl, good family, good home, thinking she was following the safety rules, and got lured by a guy into this situation.
Unbelievable.
So when people say it can't happen, or these are just decoys, that's what I tell them.
But you've seen it. When you're, and I haven't seen every episode. I'm planning on binge watching your entire catalog.
That sounds like a pleasant Thanksgiving.
I was thinking over Christmas, maybe.
Your in-laws must be horrible.
During the confrontations, have you ever been physically attacked?
There have been a couple occasions where somebody lunged, or I could tell that this guy, much more buff than I, was tensing up and was thinking about
Punching you.
doing something. I've got a lot of security there.
You do, but you don't. They could be carrying a weapon.
We try to do everything in our power to make sure they're not. Through background research, if they're carrying, we have some other technology that we use. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's that's why I'm always watching their hands. So it's not just an interview. It's really, you're monitoring a lot of different things at the same time. So, get your hands out of your pocket.
But you're alone in there. I mean, that's
Well, it looks like I'm alone, but Ronnie Knight is 4 feet away.
That's why he always says, "Would you like to have a cookie?" So he's busy with his hands with the food.
We've got a lot goes into the security protocol. You're right. You are flying, by the seat of your pants on some of this, and that's why I think it's become so wildly popular and iconic, is because there's no faking it. I still get questions from people all the time. What happens to the actors? I said, no, those aren't actors. Those are real. Wait, that was real? Yeah, it's real. This isn't
Maybe we could devise a metal detector that could go around the door that they would know, and as they come in, it starts beeping. But then that blows the whole cover. I love the scene when you announce who you are, and then the camera crews slowly descend on the person. There's like 3 or 4 people, and they're all coming in, and I'm like, what the hell is this guy thinking at this point? I mean, that's also kind of an iconic scene, then when they all just kind of descend on it. And at least the episodes I watched, I mean, they just sat there and they're like, what the hell is going on?
Oh, yeah. Because even though they've been recorded the whole time with hidden cameras, that doesn't register. They still think that that's the first time cameras are going to capture what they're doing. And so there's this epiphany, in a bad way, this realization that, I'm in real trouble now. And this is going to be on TV.
So, why did it end?
It ran its course, I think, from a number of different angles. It became very expensive. I think some of the people involved in the production, who were freelance, got a little ahead of themselves with the billing. I think NBC realized that They could take the vast material that had been shot, produced, recut it, re-edit, re-air it, make the same money without going out to do it again. People have said that it was because of the district attorney who was caught in the Texas investigation, who ended up committing suicide in Texas when the police went to arrest him. That really didn't have a bearing on it. There was a lawsuit filed in the case that was settled. The reality was that district attorney, that assistant district attorney, only knew that police were coming to arrest him. He also knew that he had child pornography on his laptop, which he was trying to destroy and couldn't. And I think knowing that in Texas he faced, and federally he faced 10 years per image, and he had multiple images, I think that's sadly what led to his suicide. And we got a bad ruling in court, and it was more expedient to settle than go to trial.
So I did read that article. This person couldn't, according to the articles I read, couldn't have known that Dateline or you had anything to do with it. It didn't make a whole bunch of sense.
It's possible, but again, it's one of those things where when you're doing a series or a show that is cutting edge and that ruffles people's feathers in a lot of different ways, people are quick to jump on it when there's an issue. And again, I don't want anybody to commit suicide.
No, of course not.
But again, it had more to do, based upon the facts of the case, with this guy having child pornography than it did knowing that he was going to perhaps be shown on the television show.
And when that happened, didn't a lot of press kind of jump on it and say, see what's wrong with this kind of reporting? And see, there's some, I don't know if it's jealousy or what, but the show was wildly successful. People were watching like crazy, and then something happens, and then they really seemed at that point to really turn.
Well, there was, and we continued to do investigations after that. So it wasn't like, oh my God, we're shutting it down. And we were very open and transparent about it. We did a story the next day on the Today Show, and local news did it. We didn't hide from it. We were completely truthful and honest about the way it went down. And it wasn't until, and I'll tell you a story that I've not told before, it wasn't until there was a federal lawsuit filed by the DA's sister that it really ginned up, and we saw some print articles and some people really misinterpret what had gone on. And the lawsuit's filed in federal court in New York, and based upon a lot of legal reviews, it should have been dismissed. The federal judge let part of it go on. There were at least 3 mock trials on the part of NBC lawyers, all of which we won. We were prepared to go to trial, and in the end, the settlement was, in the eyes of NBC, so reasonable, they agreed. Now, this did not sit well with me or with anybody else on that team. But when you think about the fact that a settlement comes out of an insurance policy, a trial comes out of the news budget, when you think about a month or more of my time, my crew's time, perverted justice's time, people with ancillary roles being called to testify who may not be the best witnesses, who could get jerked around on the stand, there's a lot of exposure there.
In my business, they call that kind of a nuisance value settlement, and it sounds like the numbers were so low that sometimes it's better to just settle. Even if there was a 100% chance of winning a trial, that sometimes happens, and it is can be disgusting, and it sounds like you felt that way, but lots of things can happen in a jury trial, lots of publicity, and the month is expensive to sit there. The legal fees could be $1 million or more easily, and if the settlement is basically peanuts.
I'm comfortable with it today. The moment that we were called in and told about it, I was not comfortable.
Right, and imagine a massive judgment. That's that you don't want those headlines either.
No, and come to find out later, and I'd be interested in your take on this, the judge, it was learned later, had a son who sadly had committed suicide. And I don't know what the circumstances were there, and I don't know, I wouldn't wish that on anyone, but you would think that might be disclosed in a case that involves a lawsuit where there was a suicide.
That's an interesting bias argument that the lawyers may or may not have made in front of the judge.
I don't think anybody knew at the
right,
time
until after. And the judge, as far as you know, it's a federal judge, so he's either on the bench or not living or really old and retired. That's really, for federal judges, that's what you get. So I don't know if he'll ever speak about it. Yeah, but that is listen, his life experiences might have come into play during the rulings, and I don't know the evidence. I haven't reviewed the file, but what evidence could possibly come in saying that he committed suicide because of your acts of negligence or intentional acts. I don't see the causal connection there at all. But I haven't seen a pleading. But I don't. This was a sick guy, maybe a bad guy. I saw the pictures of his home with the laptop there, and I mean the home was creepy as it was. I mean this guy, and he was a district attorney. So I mean, and the fact that he knew the police were coming and he killed himself, I don't know how they get to blame you or NBC. I don't see the legal theory there.
No, and nor did we. But again, faced with the alternatives and the the possibility of it being very expensive and time consuming, and maybe you don't get justice.
Right. The judges are powerful. If they want to get it to a jury, then things do settle that probably shouldn't. But
part of moving on from that series though, at the time, because I remember talking to you through it, was they wanted and needed you to do other things at Dateline. I mean, there's so much time involved in doing these sting operations, yet the world was still moving. There were other...
Well, I never stopped, my day job reporting to do just To Catch a Predator,
right.
Hansen versus Predator. I mean, it's always been a small percentage of the portfolio. It just happens to be what became this iconic, attention-grabbing thing, and now it's skipped a generation. So because of YouTube and all these streaming services, and kids are watching this like it's the first time it's ever been on.
Right.
And it's really an interesting experience, and it's allowed me a lot of opportunity. You can do one or two things with something like this. You can say, I want to distance myself from it because I'm so much more about that. I've won 10 Emmys, none of them for Predator. But I think you embrace it and you leverage it for the popularity and what it is to go out and do all these other projects that I'm currently working on. And I think that's what we do.
This is what made you famous. I mean, why would you back away from this? Why would you not use this? You're in the entertainment business.
The temptation to say, okay, I've spent my life being a hardcore, straight-edge journalist. I had an office at the federal courthouse. Kevin has an office at the federal courthouse. We go out and cover news every day. Just like Kevin in the Channel 4 newsroom, there's a slot in the rundown, and it said for years Dietz TVA, and before that Hansen TVA. And somebody said, what's TVA? It's to be announced. Well, do you know what he's going to do? No. When will you know? Sometimes not till 4:45, but he'll find something that will be suitable for a lead story 4 out of 5 days a week. And that's what guys like us do. So to all of a sudden be, we're used to being in the public eye, but to be thrown into this international spotlight, it takes a minute to get used to it.
And it's pretty crazy because you can do 1,000 stories that make a massive difference, and people are still going to just remember one thing. I remember for the 4th of July, I was going out of town. I told my buddies, check out this tip. Supposedly, a strip club on 8 Mile is having a golf outing. I'm going to be out of town. That should be interesting. They take their hidden cameras, and this thing is off the chain. There's hundreds of guys and 50 naked strippers as caddies at this golf outing, and it's all now on camera, including about an 11-year-old boy who's up in a tree with binoculars trying to look. And I didn't think that much of it, but we came back and we talked about it, and we said, "Oh my gosh, this is unbelievable footage. Let's put it on." Well, Yeah, we put it on, and it had ratings like the Super Bowl has ratings, and so it ended up being on about 17 times in the month of July instead of one.
Which happens to be a ratings month.
Yeah, which is a ratings month. Well, it took me about 3 or 4 years before people even talked about anything other than that story. I wasn't even there. I mean, literally, I sent my team out there, and then I went and talked to people in the neighborhood
It was
afterwards.
still your story. You didn't give it to somebody else.
Yeah, oh, sure, yeah, whatever. I don't need to run from it now. I may go do it again.
What year was this?
That was 20 years ago.
So Newman, were you 11 at the time? Were you the kid in the tree with the right?
Oh yeah.
So that's funny. So let's take it from Dateline. You then went on to Crime Daily.
Crime Watch Daily, which is a syndicated show we did for a couple of years, and did Killer Instinct with ID, Investigation Discovery. And it was great shows. We did the latest Predator, became a part of Crime Watch Daily, so that was kind of a serialized feature, Hansen versus Predators, which is the one I was talking about in Connecticut we did a few years back.
Is that the one with the pizza guy that I just saw?
Exactly, the pizza guy and the cable guy.
So what I'd like to do, we've not done this yet, but I want to show some footage of one of your recent subjects. So my team here is going to play it, and then I'm going to ask you some questions about what you're doing today. Okay, so let's
On
roll
top
it.
of being lied to already many times, I was cheated on. And now I have to be funny. I'm a really funny guy. And I can suck it all up in front of the camera and act completely okay. And you get hurt. You think it would be fair to say you were asking for it? What about women and men who decided to go home to abusive relationships? Do you think they're asking for it? Because otherwise, this abuse that's going to keep on occurring. Don't say you didn't get what you asked for, not when you have a choice.
Yes, but I'm Onision and I don't care about the law or basic morals.
I got on Skype chat with Kai, and Kai did not have a top on.
She was nude from the waist up.
Yes.
Okay, so Chris, I want to talk about what you're working on these days. I've been following you. I'm seeing some crazy videos of this Onision character and his wife Kai. I think his real name is Gregory Jackson, but I've never seen a character like this. People are telling me that he's been on YouTube for a long time now. Tell me what's going on.
This got on our radar several weeks ago, and mostly through social media. People were reaching out and saying, you need to investigate this Onision, this Gregory Jackson. So we started taking a look, and we did a couple of shows on my YouTube channel, the show Have a Seat with Chris Hansen, and it got an amazing response, Mike. And we started digging in, and then we started interviewing some of his alleged victims. And what would happen is these girls at 12, 13, 14 who had found him and his videos on YouTube got enthralled. It was almost like a cult-like experience. And then either he or his wife, Kai, would then reach out in many cases to these young women, groom them, make them feel good about themselves, send pictures back and forth, sexually explicit pictures, and in some cases have them come out to their home in Washington State, live with them. There are allegations of sexual impropriety. Kai and Onision Greg have children in that environment.
Wow.
And there is a very strong case to be made for enticement, transmission of child porn, and some other potential federal crimes here. So we're staying on this story, and it's starting to yield some results.
So as you talk to these victims, are you seeing patterns in how this Onision guy was able to lure them or groom them?
There is always a sense of vulnerability. The girl is sometimes from a home where there is some strife, perhaps a divorce, perhaps they're having emotional issues. Onision would do videos on don't kill yourself, you're worth more. And some of the videos were helpful to a lot of people. He became a YouTube sensation early on in the whole YouTube experience. And so he had a big following there and in a couple other places. But then it turned. And now what we're seeing, since we've been exposing him and interviewing the victims, he has gone out and aggressively and in some cases viciously attack these young women online, putting their personal information out there, going after them, exploiting videos that were sent in confidence, that the girls had sent earlier on, experiences. And also the wife, Kai, is also involved here, recruiting some of these young women who moved out there for a period of time and just were so just offended and disgusted by the activity there that they ultimately bailed. But now there's almost like a support group, a potential civil suit and criminal exposure here that is just coming to the surface. And just as we speak here, he has been deplatformed on Patreon, which is one of the platforms where you can have people sign up and subscribe to your material. Your
But
content.
he's still very active on YouTube.
As we sit here today, he's very active.
Have
on
you
YouTube.
talked to people at YouTube about pulling him down?
I have reached out to YouTube. I have had an email exchange with the CEO and her designated media representative. I had a promise that they would get back to me, and as of this moment, I have not heard back.
You talked about working with the law enforcement and to catch a predator. Are you working with law enforcement at this time on Onision, or is it not at that level yet?
I have reached out with an inquiry to the FBI, and so we're trying to figure out, is there an open investigation in Washington State where he lives? We've been alerted to criminal potential evidence that exists, that we want to make sure these victims get to the proper authorities. We don't want to get in the middle of handling any of this stuff. So we've been in contact with the FBI, to try and facilitate all this.
So I know you do your homework. So who is this guy? Who's Gregory Jackson? And you say he's married. You say he has kids. I'm sure that some sort of surveillance has been done out there. I mean, who is this guy?
He's a guy who I tried to get to come on the show to talk about all this stuff. He's a guy like so many others who saw an opportunity in this YouTube digital world with no particular experience, nothing but a little bit of, guts and a flair for being dramatic on camera, who caught on. He did a goofy little song called the Banana Song, and that became sort of a YouTube sensation. And today in this medium, that's all it takes.
It's one hit.
It was his version of To Catch a Predator, I suppose, in a way. And
made him famous.
suddenly everybody is watching him. He's making money. A lot of money these guys can make if they're monetized, which he, by the way, I believe still is on YouTube as we sit here today.
Have you sent anybody out to knock on his door? Have you guys flown out to try to knock on his door?
We have not done that yet. We have offered him to appear on the show. He said he would do so for $350,000. I said, well, we don't do that.
Right.
And he's made a series of videos that my moderator has seen, and I have not seen most of them, but they're bizarre and just really creepy and weird.
He is creepy. He is weird. He cries a lot. He did a messed up one, with you, trying to make it look like a real interview with you. That was completely outrageous, and it did have probably 20,000 thumbs down on YouTube and very few thumbs up. So people are onto him. And there's lots of chat. Don't watch him. Don't give him the publicity. Don't give him the money by watching him. It sounds like there's a boycott, and it feels like your energy around it is helping that movement.
Well, I think so, and I think this is where we can do some good on social media, on these platforms. I mean, look, the reality is, I'm going to continue to make my living in television. We're working on a number of different shows right now that are all going to be on within the next several months. But I have hit on something here. And you can't deny, when you look at the numbers, in 4 or 5 weeks, if you get 2 million views on a topic, it's important. There. Something's there, and we're going to stay on it and see it through. And I think what we can bring to it is a certain gravitas and importance that gets the attention of the proper authorities, that maybe takes it from just being another internet sensation to something, okay, we got to deal with this because there's a problem. He's been victimizing people. I mean, this starts to get close to, on a slightly different scale, the NXIVM cult thing. I mean, and we don't know how many victims are out there.
Well, you watch this thing, and so, maybe the last episode 500,000 people have watched this episode. And on YouTube, you can comment in real time. And so these comments are going, and you see these people, supporters of the victims, and they feel like they're not just their friends or someone who knows them. These are people who feel like they've gone through something like that. Right. Like, to some extent, they can recognize this, or they're familiar with it. And it just makes you stop and think, is there this massive problem out there that needs to get addressed that just we haven't even scratched the surface of?
But this goes back to your point earlier, Kevin, about what do you do with young kids online? And it does become an issue of parental responsibility, because if you take, and again, I'm not criticizing any parents involved in the Onision case, but if you take the cases where the girl did go out there and live with Onision and Kai versus the ones where they're just abused online because, and only because, the mother said, no way in hell are you going, there's a whole different level of damage there.
I watched the one with this Billy.
Yeah, that was last week's show, yeah.
It was confusing. I mean, she didn't, were you surprised that she didn't think that they did anything wrong, anything criminal?
I think she views that from the standpoint of her being a certain age when certain things happen. Did they do anything wrong? Yes, in that they abused and criticized and groomed and then harassed her online. I think there is potentially some criminal exposure there. I think what she's referring to, and what is somewhat confusing when you watch it, she's referring to, did she feel that she was sexually assaulted? Was she underage when certain pictures were sent back and forth? But what that story goes to, Billy's story, is the grooming, how they work these kids. And the next one after Billy, Haley, will actually come in sequence in terms of who they preyed upon next.
Oh. So you have another one coming.
Another one coming.
And are you getting emails all the time from people or victims saying, check this person out, check that person out?
Yes, and interestingly, to what Kevin said just a minute ago, we also are getting a lot of contact about, check out this YouTuber or this person on Patreon or that. So it's a whole different era of To Catch a Predator, really, when you get down to it.
And when you contact law enforcement, I mean, are they interested? Yes. They hear you out, but you haven't seen a lot of movement yet.
We just started this. I mean, it's relatively new.
How long ago? Like, I'm trying to figure out, is this just a few weeks?
6 to 8 weeks, right?
6 to 8 weeks?
Not even 8. I mean, it's 5 or 6 weeks with Onision. And honestly, I was trying to, we've done a lot of shows on different topics and trying to figure out, what appeals to that audience. And, I've done some really cool, smart shows, out of New York that I thought were great that, did all right, but they weren't getting 500,000 views. We have one of the shows is almost 800,000 and we'll hit 1 million.
Yes, you're killing it on YouTube. What's just for our listening and viewing audience? Tell people what your
they can
YouTube
watch
channels.
The show. It's Have a Seat with Chris Hansen on YouTube, and we do it live on Wednesdays at 8 Eastern, and then obviously you can view it as many times as you want.
So that's tonight.
Yes.
You have 90,000 subscribers on that show so far. How did you do that? For two guys who are starting out a podcast, how did you get your YouTube channel with over 90,000 views?
Well, we had the other one that was 70, and then we changed it over because we got into this, situation with YouTube where, because of using the word predator and some others, apparently we tripped an algorithm and became demonetized, which is fine. I didn't get into it to make money, really. I just did it because I wanted to be relevant in that demographic, to be honest with you.
Right.
So we started the new YouTube channel, which only has the live shows that we've done. And we still haven't been monetized, which is irritating only because we haven't done anything to be in trouble or anything bad or weird. All we're out there doing is trying to protect people, and yet Onision is monetized on YouTube as we sit here today.
You got to ride this. I mean,
absolutely.
This is a disgusting character to be relevant about these days. But if you could bring him down, or have somebody really investigate him, but you're definitely making a difference. Hopefully, he's not getting more popular.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, all of this is about really, it comes down to two things: creating awareness and a dialogue that didn't exist before about whatever topic. And if you can take people inside of a crime, understand the mind of a criminal, hear the voice of a victim, you can prevent other people from becoming victims. And that's kind of what all my stuff is about.
So before I let you go, I know you're busy. I know you got to get ready for this podcast. But people who love you. They want to see what else you're working on. You told me a couple things before we came on the air. What can we expect from you in the next 2-3 months?
We've got a series coming up on oxygen, 𝗕𝗓𝗓, homicide for the holidays. So that'll be on very shortly. We've got another major project that is along the lines of the Jeffrey Epstein case, another billionaire. And I'll be able to figure out where that's going to be in the very, very near future. But that's the next big thing. And 4 or 5 other things that are close.
And Mike, you should ask him how he decided to get into the news business, because it's very interesting and it kind of ties in with some stuff going on in Hollywood right now, and that's the Irishman movie that we talked about before, and Jimmy Hoffa.
Well, what Kevin just said, how'd you get into the news business?
Well, I was 15 years old, and Jimmy Hoffa was kidnapped about a mile from my home, and I just became fascinated with the story. I used to ride my bike up there, and I could see the crime tape and the FBI agents and the local cops and the reporters and the network correspondents, and I sort of just got bit by the bug and the whole mystery of it all. And when I went to Michigan State on the first day, I just went to the campus radio station, signed up, and off I went.
Been doing it ever since.
Ever since. Well, I worked I caddied for a summer. I worked in a bakery as a baker's apprentice, and I hauled drywall. And other than that, I've only been a reporter.
Where'd you caddy?
Forest Lake.
Oh, nice. Good course.
I caddied at Orchard Lake.
Another good course. Well, are you a golfer?
Not a particularly good one, but yeah, I get out there. I enjoy it.
And you have a home here in Michigan.
Yes.
So how often are you here?
A lot. In the summer, depending on the shooting schedule, I'm here a lot. And Gabrielle and I are back and forth between New York City and the house here. Everybody's either between the 4 kids, between the 2 of us, we have everybody in college or working and making money. My 2 are in the business. One's behind the camera, and the other's a reporter for the Fox station in Oklahoma City now, so he's working his way up.
Wow. What do you think about him being a Fox reporter?
Well, it's local news. It's
local.
It's he's into that. He's doing well. And Kevin knows him. He started in Traverse City at the same station where Kevin started many years earlier.
So a lot of incest going on.
It all started with Bill Bonds. I blame Bill Bonds for it all.
They were showing Bill Bonds on TV yesterday. They were, about the Michigan rivalry and how we'd always get it hyped up between Michigan and Michigan State, and how he was calling them all the names and good names.
It's a great editorial. I watch that every 6 months.
He's good. He was good. Love Bill Bonds. Well, listen, this was great.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
This was fabulous. I'm going to watch you tonight. I'm going to binge watch you over the holidays and hopefully not get too depressed.
Get into therapy right afterwards.
Right. And I will definitely look forward to seeing you next year, and hopefully you'll come back on.
Awesome. Anytime.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Joining us this morning is Mike Morse, Detroit's top attorney. Mike Morse is in here to tell us about the backpack giveaway.
Adapt and change things up a little bit every year. Thanks for watching Open Mic. I hope you've been enjoying the episodes. Please subscribe over here. Watch all the episodes, like the episodes, share the episodes, and subscribe. Subscribing helps me, and it helps get the word out. So do it. Enjoy the episode, share with your friends and family, and keep enjoying.